You're listening to the One Podcast with Jordan Pendleton.
The reason I wanted Ben Criddle to be with me on the show is because he's great at what he does. If you don't know Ben, he is the host of Cougar Sports on ESPN 960 and the owner of Ortho Pros of Utah. But more importantly, a great friend of mine and someone who was with me during a very pivotal time in my life. I brought Ben here today so we can reminisce about my college career and how it all went wrong with injuries. This story will go in depth of my upbringing, my highlights, failures, and picking myself back up to become a business owner. Welcome my host to the very first podcast, Ben Criddle.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the One Podcast with Jordan Pendleton. You may know him as JP. I call him Penny. The number one guy on the football field, the number one guy in our hearts, right? Keeping it real. I'm Ben Criddle. I have the honor of hosting the very first episode of the podcast. I'm honored. I say that. I don't say that lightly. I'm very much honored to be here in studio with JP. And, just so you all know, I feel like JP, Jordan Pendleton, is one of the most successful, talented, hardworking. He's just relentless in his effort, especially when he's found his passion, and he's found that with that passion comes compassion. He's very compassionate and loves people and wants to see people be successful in their lives and find that passion. He's down to earth. When you get to know him, he just wants to have a good time and make everybody happy. And he's one of the most down to earth people I've ever met. And he's found success in so many facets of his life, and that's why I'm excited to see what this podcast what type of impact this podcast will have. So in this podcast, we'll be touching on a variety of topics, including healthy lifestyle, human performance, nutrition, leadership, most importantly, in my opinion, adversity and failure, but also the successes that come from adversity and failure. So in this first episode, we have the opportunity to get to know JP, kind of pull back the veil a little bit. Like, everyone looks at JP. I remember, once upon a time, JP and I collaborated and had like a work relationship. He was working with me, and I got a call from a young lady who was very much intimidated by this man who was, doing a little bit of work at a certain hospital, a certain facility. And she's like, "Who is this dude with tattoos and long hair? And he's massive. He looks so mean." I'm like, "You got it all wrong. He's a softie. He's so kind. He's so nice. You just got to talk to him." And people are intimidated by this brute, okay? But he's an awesome dude, and I feel blessed and honored to call you my friend, JP. So let's pull back the veil for everybody and discover, who JP is, but what made JP, what made Jordan Pendleton who he is. So let's start off with just childhood, man. Like, where are you from? Where did you grow up? Who raised you? All the things that kind of form you as a young man.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I was born and raised right here in Utah. I was actually born in Provo, believe it or not. So it was weird that I ended up back down there for college. But I was born in Provo, and then, most of my life I grew up in South Jordan, played at Bingham High School before, going to BYU. And honestly, I was just like, from the minute I was 5 years old, I knew what I wanted to do. And, part of that came from my dad and his influence on me. My dad was super hard on me. And I was raised to work hard. And, he held me at a level that was higher than any other coach could have ever held me to that standard. And so I became used to that. That was the norm for me. I wanted the pressure. I wanted the work. And a lot of that came from him. And then, my mom is, she's what brings out the soft side of me, because she's, the most unselfish person I've ever met. And, she's super compassionate, and I've never seen her be rude to anybody. And so that's where that soft side comes out. But you get a little combination of both, and you got a pretty sexy guy.
Hell yeah. Yes, you are. So I've been told. By the opposite sex. What are the names of your mom and dad? Give them a shout out.
Yeah, Kirk and Brenda.
Kirk and Brenda. Well, they did a pretty good job raising you. Obviously, you've had a great life thus far, and you've accomplished so much. You talk about, where you were raised, what you were doing. Did you naturally gravitate towards competition? Because it seems like, you've always been a very competitive person, not overbearingly competitive where you're annoying to friends, but it seems like you seek out competition and you want to be successful once you've found your passion.
Oh, 100%. I can't do anything unless I'm competing, right? And I learned that from my dad. My dad's the most competitive person. I would see him and my mom get in fights when they went bowling because my mom would beat him, and he would be so pissed. And I just remember that's what I grew up with. So when I was younger, at a very young age, I'm talking 7, 8 years old, when you start having sleepovers with your friends, right? And my friends, for some reason, everybody always came to my house. They slept at my house. And part of it was just because my parents they just let us be kids. We would be playing basketball games outside on our outdoor basketball hoop, lights on, and we're playing till 4 a.m. Their bedroom's right next to the court. And so we're out there loud, listening to music and playing, and my parents never came out and yelled, it's bedtime or it's past your bedtime. But deep down, I think it's because my dad was if he's out there working hard, I'm going to let him. And so they never stopped it. And, my friends would come over, they're 8 years old, and we're having sleepovers, and my dad would legit make us wrestle each other, fight each other. We would compete. We would have push-up competitions,
boxing matches and stuff.
Let's
would he throw boxing gloves on you?
No, legit. We had our top floor in our house we had a vaulted ceiling, right? So we had tall ceilings. So my dad, and then there was a drop down. So my dad would put blue chalk on our fingers. And he's let's see who can jump the highest.
Yeah.
So we'd be running in my house, jumping up and smacking the ceiling, and we blew fingertips everywhere. And whoever jumped the highest, he would always hook you up, take you to Maverick and buy you a bunch of soda and gummy bears and whatever. And so we competed all the time. And for my friends that might be listening to this, they know, if you came over to my house, you were going to work.
It's time to compete.
It was time to compete, man.
Well, thanks to Kurt for teaching him passion and competitive nature, and thanks to Brenda for teaching him compassion and a soft heart. And so, going in line with that in competition, which sports were you playing growing up? Were you playing all the sports? Did you gravitate towards one or two that you were best at?
All of them. It's funny because I preach to a lot of the athletes that I train to. I tell these parents, put them in any sport that you can, because I felt that really helped me later on. But man, I played soccer when I was younger. I played soccer, baseball, I ran track, I played football, I played basketball. I played all these things, and it's funny. I played these competitively until high school, and then in high school I played 3 sports. I ran track and I played football and basketball. And the only reason I didn't play baseball is because baseball and track were during the same season, and so I couldn't do both. And me personally, baseball wasn't necessarily a passion. I was good enough to play growing up and was successful, but I like to hit people way too much. And so
controlled violence.
Yeah, and so, but I felt like track was going to better my career because I was working on speed and explosiveness, and that was going to translate more over to football or basketball, which were the 2 sports I was most passionate about. So I played them all, man.
So in high school, though, it was a transition to basketball and football.
And track.
Yep. And then when did you know that football was the long-term, the long-term path for you where you can get the most out of your athletic ability?
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of people don't know that basketball used to be my main sport.
That was your first love, right?
It was my first love, and I was really good at it. A lot of people, they look at me now.
I'm trying to find that. You promised me a highlight film, guys.
Well, maybe
you promised me a highlight film, and I was like, could we get that on YouTube? Could we get that somewhere?
Maybe I'll get that. I'll put it up. I'll have Heepa put it up on this.
Say we get it out there.
On
It'll
this
go
episode
viral.
because that was my sport, man, and I was really good at it. And I actually started getting letters for basketball before I ever got letters for football. And then it was about, my freshman year, I did really good in both. And then my sophomore year, man, I had a coach that really messed me up in basketball, like with my confidence. It was the first time I experienced that mental component of the game, and really messed me. And it was just like, he was trying to change my shot. And you know how a shot is, like, shooters shoot how they shoot.
Yeah.
Right? And if it goes in, then who
Don't
cares
matter
what it
what
looks
the
like.
form is, yeah.
And my shots went in, and he tried to change my shot, and my confidence disappeared, bro. I mean, I went from, but I was still effective. Like, I still helped my team win a state championship. I still started, and I played all the way through my senior year. So we were successful. We won a state championship. We went to the semis the following year and lost to Tyler Haws in the semis, which Lone Peak, they had some dominant teams there for a while. But basketball was my sport. But it was about my sophomore year when that happened, because I still loved basketball. I still played. I was still good. I still started. But there was a component of my game that totally disappeared, and it made me a worse basketball player. And I'll never forget my high school coach, Dave Peck, a legendary coach, just got entered into the Football Hall of Fame here in Utah. He came up to me one day in the hallway, and he pulled me aside, and it was when I was a sophomore, and he said, I only tell you this just because, I love you. And he's like, you can take whatever I say and throw it out the window, whatever. He's like, you can play in the NFL. Yeah. And he's like, you can play. He's like, I've coached thousands of players, and like, you're going to play in the NFL. And he's like, I'm not telling you to quit basketball. I'm just telling you that if you want to play at the highest level, you should really focus on football.
It's interesting that you say that, because like I try to tell people on my show, like when we talk freak athletes, typically it's like an off-season deal. Freak athletes, modern day BYU, Ziggy Ansah, Taysom Hill. I always bring up you because people don't realize that your career was cut short due to injury, but you were one of those freak athletes at 6'3", 200 almost 50 pounds. You ran a 4.540 on junior day, but we can
4.49.
Yeah,
4.49. The 4 makes it different, and it was laser time too, and it was after my knee surgery too.
That's a competition.
Yeah.
And this guy.
Feel that?
Yeah, I feel that right
there. Can't give me a 4.5, bro.
No, 4.5, 4.49. So, high school, how many state championships did you win? And the reason why I bring it up is because, you faced a little adversity mentally, but still you thrived, found your niche, and found success in championship and a championship culture.
Yeah, so I won 2. I got 2 rings, one in basketball, one in football. And the basketball one was special just because, man, like, nowadays, all these schools, like, they just get kids from all, like, there's all these club teams, right?
Yeah, recruiting and stuff.
So, like,
happens.
Kids that go to this high school will play with a totally different kid that goes, like, they don't play, it's not the kids that you grew up with that you end up playing in high school with, right? Because there's so many club teams. Back then, we just had Super League. And so my high school basketball team, we had literally played together since we were like 9 years old. So it was like, that's why that was so special, is because we were 9 years old all playing on the same team and went all the way up to high school together. And so that's what made that so special. But my football championship, my senior year, that goes down as one of my greatest moments in my entire life, because, a lot of people look at Bingham right now, and they've won, I think, 7 championships out of the last, like, 11 or 12 years. It's something ridiculous. In 2006, my senior year, we were the first team to win in 60 years. But Bingham, a lot of people don't realize, Bingham had a 60-year drought where they never won a state championship. And they also, as successful as they were, as far as, they did have good teams, they just could never, reach that end goal. 60 years, last one was 1946, and we won in 2006. And, there was a lot of good players that came out of Bingham. and there was a lot of good teams, and to be the first ones to be able to do that, and then have the year that I had, win MVP, and eventually, obviously was playing and had a full ride scholarship to keep playing, but that goes down. I'll never forget about that day.
Then let's talk about, so that championship culture obviously, ended up developing a lot of Division I talent, and it continues to be a pipeline for colleges. When you kind of set that bar pretty high for the rest of the following generations, talk about that recruiting process. Who was recruiting you at the time, and then why did you ultimately choose BYU?
Yeah, it's funny. I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think I was the first player from Bingham High School to get a Division I scholarship and actually start for that college. There was one guy, it was like my brother's senior year, 2000. He got a scholarship, but I don't think he ever panned out. I don't think he ever played. And so yeah, that was also so. And it's crazy because back then the recruiting game was so different. Now you have Twitter and you've got Huddle and you got all this stuff. Kids can pump out highlight films in one little 5-minute session.
Yeah, and they have their stats published online, max preps,
everything. So these scouts, Twitter wasn't even created until I was in college. Twitter, it was actually one of my first assignments in one of my business classes was we had to create a Twitter account and get somebody to respond to us or something. So I was tweeting it whoever.
You had Twitter before me, man. I was a late adopter.
Yeah, but I had 0 followers and I never used it until I got into my adult life. Yeah. But anyway, we didn't have any of that. So my recruiting process, honestly, was just go out and ball out. And that was my dad didn't know how to get me recruited. My mom didn't know. They funded everything they needed to fund for me. They gave me the best basketball shoes, the best cleats, and I just went out and played. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't ever worried about it. I just felt like if I had success that would come. But my process was really simple. Didn't know how the hell to get recruited. And I started as a sophomore and I just started putting on film. And my junior year, I got a call from BYU, and I remember Coach Doman was my recruiting coach, and he came and got me out of school because I thought I was in trouble. The intercom comes of Jordan Pendleton to the president's office or whatever.
The president's on it. I like that, man.
Or the principal. So anyway,
you went to a different school than me. Yeah, president.
So I'm like, shit, dude, I'm in trouble. What did I do? And I go down, and Coach Doman was there. Great dude, loved him to death. But that was my first recruiting experience. Was Coach Doman, and then before my junior year, they offered me a full ride, and I'll never forget. I was at school, and Coach Peck comes and gets me out of class, and he's like, "Hey, I just got off the phone with Bronco Mendenhall, and he wants to offer you right now." And I was like, "Holy shit, dude!" You know that
yeah, butterflies.
Yeah, man. Especially as a junior, because it was like, man, I can really do something special here. And so, anyway, he called Coach Peck. Coach Peck answered. Coach Peck handed me the phone. And he was like, "Jordan, how you doing? This is Bronco Mendenhall." And I'm like, "What's up, dude?" What do you say to that? But anyway, he just told me, he's like, "Hey, we love the way you play. You're going to be a really good football player for us, and I want to offer you right now a full ride." And dude, I was so excited, but I didn't share that moment with anybody. Right? I was just at school, and then I went back to class and. I was reading books and shit. So
doing math problems.
Yeah. So we didn't, nowadays you got all these kids that line up all these hats on the table and they're like, I don't know what school I'm going to go to. And you're like, just pick a hat, bro. Yeah. You haven't done anything yet. Just commit to your school and work hard, So, but it's a show nowadays and it's different. But that's how it was. And then the only other thing aside from that is, so I committed to them. because I loved Bronco Mendenhall, and I loved his defense, and I felt like I could thrive specifically in his defense. And yeah, man. So, but Oregon came along somewhere along the road when I was already committed to BYU, and it was Coach Croton that was recruiting me, who was the former, BYU head coach. He's the offensive coordinator at Oregon. He wants me to come play receiver. BYU told me I could choose offense or defense, but they told me Broncos I want you on defense though.
Bronco likes to hoard the talent on the defense.
He hoards it. Yep.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So then I was like, because
he's like, you're my next Brian Urlacher.
Yeah. So I played receiver in high school, and my dad, he was a receiver at BYU and played in the NFL for a little bit. And so receiver was that was my jam growing up in high school. And, I was like, man, I better go check this out. So what I did is I went on a unofficial, right? Which I just thought if I didn't make it official, nobody would find out. I'd be good. And so I go on an unofficial visit, and that place, Eugene, blew me away, dude. It is it is the prettiest campus I had ever seen. Their stadium, their resources, their equipment, their facilities. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And I really liked Coach Croton. And, he would come and get me out of school a lot. And I was like, dang. So I took a trip, and BYU found out. And I'm like, this is without Twitter too. It's like, how the hell did they find out, Yeah. So Brandon Doman comes to Bingham the day I get home, takes me out, and we go in this room, and he's like, so we know that you went to Oregon. What's going on?
It's like you cheating.
Yeah, you cheating on me. And I felt extremely bad because I did commit. Yeah. But nowadays, dude, these kids commit and then they change like it's going out of style. But at the end of the day, it was my core value. And Croton told me when I went out there too. He said, if you tell me you'll decommit from BYU right now, we'll offer you. And I was like, holy shit. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, give me let me think about it, because they pull it and you guys don't fall, this could be a disaster, right? So anyway, I go back. Coach Doman comes and gets me out of class the next day, and he's like, we found out. He's like, what's going on? And I felt so bad. And so at the core, I made a commitment, and I wanted to follow through with that commitment. At the end of the day, they were the first team to offer me. And if they wanted me that early on in my career, then that's where I ultimately wanted to be. And then I'll never forget, BYU and Oregon played each other in the bowl game that year, and you were playing. Yeah. Because I remember I was like, "Who's number 21? That's my number next year."
I was injured that game, and I was on the bench. I got that Ben.
I'm like, 21's my number. We'll talk about that. And so, anyway, man, I forgot what I was talking about.
The Oregon game.
Yeah. So BYU plays Oregon that year in the bowl game, the Las Vegas Bowl. It was 2006. And I was still hung up on what to do, because I always wanted to move out of state and go pave my own path. My dad played at BYU, and it was cool to somewhat follow in his footsteps, but I've always wanted to create my own path. I try to go down the road less traveled. And I got together with all my friends, and I said, whoever wins this game is the school I'm going to go to. And you guys kicked their ass,
it was not even close.
And then that's when it hit me. I was like, all right, BYU's onto something special, and Mendenhall's doing something special. And in Utah, Urban Meyer just left. Mm-hmm. And honestly, Kyle didn't, they recruited me, but they didn't. It was really standoffish. And so I just went up to their stadium and won a state championship on their home field to prove to them that they were missing out. Yeah. So, but that's how it happened, man. So I ended up going choosing BYU, and the rest is history.
Get to BYU, rather than playing linebacker immediately or playing wide receiver, you're playing safety, right? And your coach is Jaime Hill. It wasn't an easy route. So you talk about adversity, in high school, kind of with coaches. People got to realize that, coaches can make or break athletes, but those that have strong mental fortitude, like yourself, they kind of persevere through that. So it's imperative that you have strong mental fortitude despite what coaches say to you, what they may do to you, the emotional, even the physical aspects of it that impact you on a day-to-day basis. So your coach is Jaime Hill and you're playing safety. What was going on there?
Yeah, so I went in and I was playing safety, and it was my freshman year, and I had never experienced a coach like him before. Because my dad was hard on me, man. I would get done with games, and I would have 25 points, and my dad would be like, "Why'd you turn the ball over 4 times?" And just in my ass. And so I'm used to I'm used to that. But Coach Hill was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. And so, that first year I was in a daze, bro. I was like, man, is this the path for me? I just wasn't sure about the whole experience, the whole situation. And I think, one thing that really bothered me is nobody really took me under their wing. You ended up eventually, but nobody ever took me under their wing and taught me the defense, right? And you know how hard it is to learn that playbook. Mm-hmm. And when I was in high school, we ran man-to-man and cover 3. And basically it was you match up with their best player and just guard them. And so that's what I did. Now I got cover 6 and cover 4 and storm and quarter half coverage and rob the curl the post, and I'm like, what the hell does all this mean? Just tell me to go line up and guard the guy. Yeah. And so that was, I struggled with that. I struggled learning the playbook because I'd never had to before. I just relied on my athleticism. And so my first year was miserable, honestly. I ended up redshirting, and I had chances just because we were kind of limited at that position. We had some seniors, but after that it was okay, man, you're next. So hop on or hop off. And so I made pushes. Sometimes I was going with the 2s, but eventually they ended up redshirting me, and that year was hard, bro. Because that was the first year I hadn't ever played sports in my whole entire life, and so you're on the outside looking in at that point.
And just to give some perspective, when I first saw Jordan, this guy was a grown-ass man, and he was 18. He came in a pretty young 18, and he's already 210 pounds, looking just ripped to shreds. And I was like, dang, who's this new dude, true freshman? And to give, and we're like, wow, this guy's going to make an impact immediately. And that was a difficult time, obviously, because Jaime Hill, who was coming from the professional, never coached high school, never coached kids, never coached even college players. It was just my paycheck is reliant on your performance, and I'm going to verbally abuse you if it takes, that's what his motto was. Yep. It would be fun at times, but it was no BS with Jaime, and that can be a very difficult thing, I think, for most of it. And he did that to a lot of players. He broke a lot of players throughout his tenure at BYU.
Yeah, he did. And honestly, there were several, I want to say 3 or 4 kids that I went in with or that were there a year before me ended up quitting.
Yeah, they left. I remember
Andrew Rich was one of them, which I don't think a lot of people realize. Andrew Rich quit football for BYU.
G. Pittman, a big
Gary Nagy,
Aaron
Adig.
Yeah, a lot of guys.
There was a lot of guys that quit.
Brandon Howard.
Yes, his senior year, huh? Yeah. So there was a lot of guys that quit under him, and I'll be honest, man, it was mentally challenging. Dude, I didn't sleep at night. I remember it was I had insomnia because I just was I don't know, I just panicked, what the heck, man, this is not how it's supposed to go. So I try and get in the playbook, in the off season, a lot more in depth, and I'm hey, I'm starting as a redshirt freshman, I'm starting as a redshirt freshman, and David Tafuna gets a gray shirt year or a medical year, so he comes back for his 7th year. and David's my guy, dude. Like, I love that dude. He saved me that year because, you know, he kept me upbeat, and he's a stud. But he got granted another year, and dude, he's like 25, 26 years old. I'm 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 19 at the time. And I was like, man, like, how am I going to take the spot of somebody that's 8 years older than me, you know? And so I was like, all right, like, I'm just going to keep working. So I came in, I kept working, and I'll never forget, man, we're in fall camp the next year. It's my redshirt freshman year. And we get to, I work my way up to the twos, and I'm rolling with the twos. And then Tafuna got hurt in fall camp. He had an injury. And so that made me up at the ones.
Yeah.
And that's what I told myself. I'm like, I'm just going to wait. You know, somebody might get hurt, and I need to step in. And so I prepared like I was a starter. I still was shaky with the defense. Like, it just still hadn't hit me, right? I was so used to just freelancing and making plays that once I had assignments, it slowed me down, and I couldn't think as fast. And part of that was because I just didn't know it enough. And so anyways, I get a whole week of practice with the ones, and I'm really excited. I'm really juiced. And I have a really good practice. I can't remember what practice it was. It was like it's like the first week or the second week of fall camp. I have a really good practice, and I'm like coming off the field, and you know how the media all is there waiting for you.
Yeah, they used to congregate like right at the field at the student athletic building.
So the media is all, they wait on the side after practice, and they interview somebody, you know, every single day. The coaches get interviewed every day, and then they'll pick a player who kind of stood out during practice. And so they chose me, and it's my first college interview. Like, I had done an interview before I went, right? But it was my first like interview being in BYU uniform. And
what number were you wearing?
Oh man, who even knows?
26.
27 or something?
I think it's
27. It was 27.
27.
27. Yeah.
Scott Johnson took the 21 after I retired.
Yeah. We'll get into that. So yeah, man, I was wearing 27, and I'll never forget. So it was Jay Drew, actually. I remember it vividly. And Jay Drew came over to me, and now, you know, me and Jay had somewhat of a background just because he interviewed me so many times at Bingham when I played at Bingham, because he was a high school guy at that time. I think he does both, but he was mainly in high school sports. And so I had done interviews with Jay Drew since my sophomore year in high school. You know, he did a feature on me one time, and so I knew him personally just from all the years, right? And he comes out, he starts interviewing me, and first interview, and he's like, hey Jordan, just you know, I saw that, you know, you've moved up to the ones today. Do you want to talk about, you know, your first experience going with the starters at practice and yada yada, just, you know, the stupid questions they ask. And I start talking, and I was like, yeah, you know, it was good. You know, David Tafuna got injured, so, you know, I'm just trying to step up. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of my interview, and Coach Hill comes running over, and he's like, don't f***ing interview him. He hasn't f***ing done anything yet. Like, he's a f***ing piece of shit. Like, don't interview him. And in front of everybody, dude. In front of everybody. In front of all the reporters. In front of, you know, all my teammates. And my heart started pumping out of my chest, dude, and I was like, I can't believe he did, like, do that in the locker room, you know, behind closed doors or whatever. Like, you can tell me I can handle that, but he just belittled me in front of the media, in front of everybody. And so I freaked out, dude. I called him a prick. I told him he was a prick in front of all the media. And I grabbed my helmet, and I threw it as hard as I could, like right in his direction. And then I was storming, like ready to fist fight. Like, I wanted to fist fight right that second. And I had teammates coming over trying to cool me down. And so anyway, I was out on the practice field, which, you know how two-a-days are. Any break you get is a blessing, you know, because we're in practice and film all day. I was out on the football field for like an hour and a half after practice, just pacing myself. And I'm like, man, I got to leave. Like, I can't do this. And I'll never forget, I go in the locker room, I go shower, and I change. And I'm walking to go up to the cafeteria. And before you go up the stairs, there's a depth chart. And they post a depth chart in the locker room every single day. You know, a lot of college coaches do it just to create that, you know, competition. And you know, sometimes they like to just mess with people, see if, you know, they can handle it, bump them down. And so anyways, I'm like, I had a feeling to check it. I had a feeling to check the, you know, the roster. And keep in mind, I had a good practice. And I'm at 5th string, bro. I'm like, I looked at Cat, which was the strong safety at the time, because I was playing safety at this time. And I'm like, where's Jordan Pendleton at? And then, bam, 5th string. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, you got to be kidding me. So he legit went in right after practice, went up to his office, moved me to 5th string, printed it off, and then went and hung it up on the wall. And I was like, wow, like what a low blow, you know?
It's kind of petty.
And so anyway, dude, I spent the rest of the camp at 5th string. Felt like I was one of the best athletes on the field. And I'm sitting at 5th string at safety. And holy hell, man. It was ridiculous. And so anyways, I just, you know, I met with Coach Mendenhall. And he's the only reason I stayed, honestly.
Did you reach out to him?
I told him I was going to transfer.
Yeah.
So he would text me and call me every day, and that's something that like a lot of people don't realize about Bronco is if you know him personally, he's an incredible person, but he cares about you as a person, not just a football player. And he reached out to me every day, and you know, I support your decision either way. And then he sent me a bunch of articles on faith and you know, a whole bunch of things and he sent me this article, and it kind of hit me like, you know, this is God just testing me right now in a good way. Like I've never had to deal with this my whole life. I've always just started, championship. And it was the first time in my life where it's like, man, I'm not the dude anymore. And so, or maybe I could be, but I'm not getting the chance. And I never had like, Coach Peck didn't do that to me, you know, but I never called Coach Peck a prick, but he would never treat me like that, you know? So anyway, it was devastating, but I kept meeting with Coach Mendenhall, cried in his office with him, and then I just put my head down and then, you know, started learning the defense a lot more. And that's what I really started putting my focus on is learning the D, learning all the coverages, but not only what I'm doing, what everybody else around me is doing. And yeah, man, so I finally get in during the season. We were playing, was it Wyoming or, man, we were blowing, I think it was Wyoming actually. We were blowing them out. We were up like 45-0, and I get put in, and I'm like, dude, even though, like, I had ran down on special teams and stuff, like, I played special teams that year, but it's different than, like, being out in your position, right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to run down on kickoff, you know? So I'm out at safety, and I'm not kidding, in 2 series, I had an interception, I had a couple tackles for loss, and then I had like a, you know, a pass breakup or something, and it was my first collegiate interception, wearing number 27, looked like a douchebag, dude. And
no offense to anyone that wears 27.
Yeah, it just didn't look good on me. So 21 looked better. But yeah, man. So that was like. That was it, man. Like it was crazy.
Is that when like things changed for you? Like, and all of a sudden you started looking up.
So the weirdest thing about that. So I didn't mention that, but like it showed glimpses for the short time I was in, and then you know what's funny is the rest of the season, never stepped foot on the field ever again.
Not even in special teams.
Yeah. So I had a game. I finally get in, and I like get a pick, TFL. Played really good, and then I never saw defense the rest of the year.
Were you still talking with Coach Mendenhall at the time, or was it more
here and there? Like he knew I was going through a hard time, so he would come and, you know, he would always make his point to go out of his way to make sure I was doing okay. But my mindset was just really about next year. I had to accept it. I had to be like, this year is a total waste, and it all started over an interview, and it should have never happened. But that's how Coach Hill was. I mean, you sat in his film rooms. You know how those film sessions. Like I dreaded every film session.
Yeah.
And Coach Hill he's a phenomenal coach. He's very smart. One of the smartest X's and O guys I've ever met. So I do have respect for him, and I don't blame him. It's just that's how he was taught to coach.
Yeah.
And it was different, and a lot of people just aren't used to it. Even me, who had it rough growing up, and so I really started focusing on the next year.
So what happened in that transition to the next year, and eventually you had a position change?
Yeah. So that was the crazy thing is, I always viewed myself as a skill guy. Like a lot of people look at me now and think I was just always a linebacker, but I was a running back, receiver, and safety. Like that's all I played my whole life. And so Brian Kill, we had some great outside linebackers like Brian Kill, David Nixon. We had some guys, and they were all gone. And so I had an off season where it's my first couple years away from basketball and track, and I'm just doing football style training. So I packed on some weight, and I think the coaches saw that and were like, dude, he's naturally putting on weight. We should move him to linebacker, because at that time we just got Andrew Rich that year, and then we had Scotty Johnson. And so they're like, how can we get them all three on the field at the same time? Because Scotty, he was genius, and he was just a playmaker. He was always in the right spot. And then Andrew Rich, obviously one of the best safeties to ever play at BYU, in my opinion. And they took that as an opportunity, and I'll never forget, they approached me and were like, hey, how would you feel about playing Sam? And at first I was kind of offended, because I'm like, what, I'm not good enough to play safety, And so anyway, I met with Coach Mendenhall, and it was like a surreal moment, because it was almost the same conversation I had with Coach Peck in high school when he told me, focus on football. I know you love basketball, but focus on football. You can play at the highest level. I had the same conversation with Coach Mendenhall, but it was about what position to play. And he told me, he was like, if you want to play safety, he's like, you're going to play safety for us. He's like, I have no doubt. He said, but, if your goal is to go to the next level, he's like, I promise that outside linebacker is your spot. And it just didn't register for a while. But, yeah, man. So I ended up making the transition over. It was my first time ever playing linebacker.
When did it click then? When did you say, okay, I'm going to play Sam? What convinced you?
Well, what convinced me is the challenge, first of all. I remember watching Brian Kill. I remember watching David Nixon. I remember watching these guys and was like, man, I can do that. And then I think the main thing is the position was so similar to strong safety.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't know, but when you run a 3-4, you have two outside linebackers. They're the most important aspect of the defense. That's why you run a 3-4, is for the outside backer. And if you look in the NFL, Von Miller, Clay Matthews, game-changing individuals, that play that position. And but you have a Sam and a Will. And the Will, 70% of the time is pass rushing, and the Sam, which is strong side, they're 70% in coverage. And so I'm like, I'm going to be playing coverage anyway, and now I know the defense from a safety standpoint. I know what everybody's doing in front of me, and now I know what I need to do because of what people are doing in back of me. And that's when it clicked, and I was like, dude, this is an easier position for me, because I don't have to be out in so much space, and I can just make plays. And so then I started really getting into the idea, but wow, man, what a rough spring ball and fall camp, dude.
But that being said, that was 2009,
Yeah.
and BYU opened up at Jerry's World versus Oklahoma. Sam Bradford, the Heisman Trophy winner of a year prior, and DeMarco Murray, and Jermaine Gresham.
Yeah.
So you had an opportunity at that time to really showcase your ability at your new Sam linebacker, outside linebacker spot. What happened?
Yeah, man. So I went through fall camp, and I'll be honest, like I was pretty shitty, dude. I was a great athlete, right? But didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had never pass rushed in my entire life. And so that was the hardest thing. Like, I'm used to covering slot receivers, outside receivers, running backs, and now I'm going up against 330-pound offensive linemen, 260-pound tight ends, and it was something that I wasn't used to. So I worked my ass off in the weight room, dude, to just get as strong as possible. And so we open up game 1 against Oklahoma, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, first game played in the stadium, and dude, number 3 ranked team in the country, Sam Bradford, Heisman Trophy winner, and then obviously DeMarco Murray, who went on to have a phenomenal NFL career, but and an All-American tight end and Jermaine Gresham, like we just talked about. And so I get that first we get that first series where I go out on defense, and dude, my heart was just like pounding. Right, there's 100,000 people in the stands, and I'll never forget the very first play, dude. They ran like a power away from me, and I was the hill line player. And so they pulled the guard and they pulled the tackle, which means that I could just come down head full of steam. And they handed it off to DeMarco Murray. I crashed the hill line, and I blew him up for a TFL, like on the very first play. And I remember just like getting chills all over my entire body, and I was like, holy shit, like this just really happened. And we were on ESPN too, so I knew people were watching, that watched me grow up. So that was then all of a sudden the butterflies went away, and I was like, all right, dude, I'm back to playing football. It was like my first play I made, and I was like, I know what I'm doing now,
And that totality, the production in that game, I think you had a forced fumble. Obviously, the W is what mattered, but individually speaking, you had probably one of your best games, even though you felt lost at times, I'm sure, but you showed out as soon as the lights turned on. It's
funny, I had a really good game. I made some key plays, especially on that goal line stand that we had. And you know what's funny is I look back at that game, at my knowledge and my assignment, and I was like, holy hell, dude. Like, I thought I was, I had a good game. I'm feeling myself. And when I was a senior and I went back and watched myself, it was like, man, you're trashed. Absolute trash.
Well, I don't know if you were trash, but we're pretty much. I know you're very hard on yourself, and it's easy to be critical at times. But so you became a starting outside linebacker, huge victory over Oklahoma, and then you had a great season that year, 2009. After 2009, transition us into 2010 and what was going on.
So, one thing we didn't talk about in the Oklahoma game is. That's where the downfall really started as far as my injuries in my body. I had a torn labrum that I think I did in the weight room. And when I got out on the field, jamming people and tapping, you know what I mean? It was when I finally felt that, like, holy crap. And so I remember I was in pain before the game, but, I had never been injured my whole life. So I was like, I'm playing. Like, I've played through some stuff, And so they numbed my shoulder before the game, so I couldn't feel it. And I didn't know what it was. Like I said, I've never been hurt before. I just thought it was sore from hitting or something. And they numbed my shoulder. I play the whole game. After the game, we're amped up. I remember you were there. You were doing your first interviews.
I was making my transition to the media world.
So I was, I was so amped up, and then I'll never forget taking off my pads, And I start trying to get in my normal clothes, and the pain meds wore off, the shot wore off. And I remember, like, I felt like my shoulder was hanging by a thread. I really thought it was hanging by a thread. And, dude, I had a teammate help me put on my socks. I managed to get my underwear up myself because I didn't want anybody helping me with that. Too much pride for that. But, you know, my shoulder was dangling, dude, and couldn't even put on my socks, couldn't put on my shoes. And I remember thinking, like, all of a sudden my excitement from the win just came down because I was in so much pain. So much pain.
And so you played like that throughout the entire season.
So I go and get they go and do an X-ray, and it shows that my AC joint is somewhat off, right? Disconnected or whatever you want to call it. And then I'm like, well, I want an MRI. Like, I want to see the structure. Because if this is just my AC joint, then AC joints hurt like hell, you know? And so I requested an MRI. I got an MRI. The results came back negative, basically. Like, so they went back to my AC joint and was like, see, it's just your AC joint. And I was like, all right. Then mentally, if it's just my AC joint, then I can continue to play. That first practice of the week, I couldn't practice because, like, I did practice. And I didn't use my left arm the whole entire practice. I practiced with one arm. And then the coaches saw it on film, and Coach Papinga was like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, I can't move my shoulder. You know, it hurts. And I'm like, I'll be fine. Like, I'll get it shot up before the game. I'll be good. But you know how Coach Mendenhall is. Like, you don't practice, or you don't, you know, he thinks you're going to be a weak link or whatever. Dude, they ended up, like, after that Oklahoma game, I didn't even start the next game. I got benched. And so, because I couldn't practice. And I was in that much pain. And then, after that game, I didn't start the next game. And I go from helping our team, you know, beat Oklahoma, I'm feeling on top of the world, and then I don't start the next 2 or 3 games because of my shoulder. And so it was that first week when I didn't start, and it really pissed me off. And that's when I told myself, I'm like, you got to get mentally tough, and you got to fight through this injury. And so I just didn't hold back, dude. I played the rest of the season with my shoulder just feeling like I legit got numbed up before every game. I would take 4-6 ibuprofen. I would get a Toradol shot, which is like ibuprofen on steroids, you know. And I would do all these things just to play. And then during the week, just to practice was ridiculous. So I get done with my sophomore year and had a decent season. All things considering, like, I played with one arm. I felt like I had a very productive and very solid first year, and was so ready to progress on that going into my junior years because I had really high goals for myself. And we get done with the season, and I'm like, I'm going to work my ass off this season. Like, this is, like, my junior year is going to be my year. And we get into like a month and a half of winter workouts, and you know, if you knew me, you knew I loved the weight room.
Yeah.
And I was really strong, and what's that award? The best conditioned athlete or whatever. Like, you know, won that award. Like, that was my passion, and I could bench as a sophomore. I could bench 430 pounds. Which is a lot.
That's ridiculous.
It was like the 3rd highest on the team, and I'm a safety turned outside backer. I'm only 228 pounds at this point, and I'm benching 430. And we get to winter workouts, and I can't even bench the bar, dude, because my shoulder hurt so bad. And that was finally, because I told myself, like, I'm battling through this, and then once the season got over, Once we beat Utah, once we beat Oregon State in the bowl game, once the season got over, I transitioned to the next season, but I forgot about this guy here. Mm-hmm. And so we're in workouts, and I go from being one of the strongest dudes on the team to like, I can't even bench the bar without excruciating pain. And so that's when I went in and raised hell at the training room, and I found out that my MRI that they gave me, they didn't give me the dye shot.
So was that on the MRI facility then? They didn't, or was that the
doctor didn't order it.
Oh.
So if the doctor thinks it's something and he doesn't feel like the need to order the dye shot, then they'll do an MRI without the dye shot. The dye shot is what shows all of the structure,
the cartilage structure,
the cartilage, the connective tissue,
labrum.
The stuff that actually matters. Because nobody, like, AC joint, get out of here. Mm-hmm. So anyway, they didn't give me the dye shot, so that's why the results came back negative. So I went in and I requested another MRI, and I said, give me the dye shot. And no, sorry, dude. That was my junior year. Sorry, they didn't give me the dye shot. And I went in. That was my junior year. See, we got so many injuries that we can't even, it's crazy. But anyway, so yeah, they didn't give me the dye shot. So I finally told myself, I said, okay, if it's my AC joint, then I'm gonna go get my AC joint fixed right now so I can play. And I went in
to another doctor.
I went into and got a second opinion, and I brought the MRI that BYU gave me. And so obviously he looks at it and he's like, oh, that's negative. Well, I went and got surgery from a shoulder specialist. Like, I didn't want those guys down there to touch me. And so I go into the surgery thinking I'm going to have a Mumford procedure.
Which is an AC joint.
Which is like it's an AC joint separation, or, the clavicle is like, it's the bones kind of going over. And so what they do is they go and, you're in the medical world, but they go and shave down that bone to make it even and smooth it out. And so it's literally like a 30-minute procedure. It's really non-abrasive. It's you're in a sling for maybe a couple days, and then you're lifting in like a week or two. It's nothing. And I go into surgery, and then I wake up, and I remember screaming at the top of my lungs, bro. Like, screaming. Like, I'm a yeller. I was screaming. And yeah, dude, it was bad. What happened was, because it was such a small procedure, they didn't give me the
nerve block, right?
They didn't give me the nerve block. And so when they went in to do my shoulder, they saw what was actually going on, which never got picked up by the MRI because they didn't put the dye shot in there. And I had a torn labrum and a shredded bicep tendon. And woke up from the surgery, no nerve block, worst pain of my life, dude. Mm-hmm. And if you've had a shoulder surgery like a rotator cuff or labrum, you know how painful those shoulder surgeries are. Now just imagine going into that with no numbing medicine, no pain medicine, no nerve block, and coming out of surgery. When you think it's just going to be something small, it scared the living hell out of me, dude. And I woke up in excruciating pain, and that's when I found out. And I was so pissed because I'm a month and a half into winter workouts. Yep. I should have had this surgery right after the bowl game or right after the Utah game so I can get back for next season. And
that's at least what, a 6?
It's like it's a 6 to 8 month recovery, and to get back to really full compact hitting, it's 8. Yeah. Unless you're LeBron James or whatever. Sure. So, but anyway, dude, I had it a year and a half in, and now I'm like, man, like, I'm gonna have to work really hard now to get back just in time for our first game because it was such a long recovery. And I was just so pissed, man, because it was like it set me back a ton.
Okay, so you get back to not necessarily 100% after this labral repair and the bicep tendon. Did they reattach the bicep tendon?
They reattached the bicep, yeah.
Okay. How long did it take you to get back, or did you just get back into fall camp and start playing and just with a shoulder brace and just get back into it?
Yeah, so this is where the story gets fun, and you'll get a kick out of this. And you know some of this stuff. That's why I thought it was so important that you were here because you went through this with me. So they, I get my protocol for my rehab, right? And
who did you get the protocol from?
The athletic trainer there
At BYU.
At BYU.
Okay.
And he told me in order for me to get cleared from my labrum tear, I had to be 20% stronger than I was before.
430 pound.
And I'm sitting here like, so I got to bench like 450 or 460 pounds before I play? I'm like, you've got to be, what protocol is that? How about let's work on some stability first? How about let's get those stabilizer muscles working? Like, let's get your full range of motion back. It was, yeah, man, like you gotta be 20% stronger before we clear you. So what do you think I do?
Yeah,
I go straight to the bench press.
You think that's a challenge?
And I'm researching how to up my bench, and that's when I started getting into programming and stuff like that. And so I would do stuff on my own. I would kind of change up some stuff I was doing there to make sure my sets and reps and my tempos and everything were how they needed to be. And that was my only focus because I just wanted to play so bad. And I remember getting my bench back up, tore my other labrum because I was compensating so bad. Like I wasn't fully healed. And so, my main focus is increasing my bench and I'm not fully healed yet, but it's because I wanted to play. And so, anyways, man,
So you tore your other labrum.
Tore my other labrum.
You felt it pop
in fall camp, right before fall camp, right before it. So I found out right before fall camp.
Like doing a 1 rep max.
Yeah, doing a 1 rep max,
which should never be done in my opinion. But I mean,
to each their own, right? It just depends on what the goal is, man. Are we powerlift? Am I an Olympic weightlifter? Or am I outside linebacker? That's what it comes down to. So anyway, man, I tear my right labrum, and this time I go get the MRI. This time they give me the dye shot because this is the thing. My shoulders never came out. And so that's why I didn't ever think it was a labrum, because that's how they tell if it's a labrum tear, like it sublexes, right? It comes out. And I got really, I got dense shoulders, and so mine, it never popped out, but it still tore. And they do a clock scale, from, mine was torn from 12 to 8.
Wow.
12 to 8, so like almost all the way around. And now I had a big decision to make, dude, because the season hadn't started yet. I'm still recovering from this shoulder, and now this shoulder's torn. Do I medical? Do I have a medical year? 2010. Or do I play through it because I already know that I can? That was the decision I had to come up with.
And you ended up choosing what because of the situation?
I mean, obviously I chose to just battle through it because that's how I am, man. Like, I played through a lot of pain, and I fed off of that. Like, it made me feel more crazier in my head, and it gave me confidence from the guy standing across from me that I was going to kick his ass.
Did anyone give you a recommendation at that time of what you should do, though?
This was the hard part. Is I really wanted my goal since I don't even know why it was my goal, but my goal since youth was to get not even go to my senior year in college. I wanted to leave early, just as a competitor. Like I wanted to leave early. And after my sophomore year, going into my junior year, started getting a little bit of hype, and it could have been a possibility. Not because I was a great linebacker, I was a good athlete, and I was new at the position, and I had potential, and that's what NFL scouts care about. And so that's what made the decision hard. But then the thought of not playing again, like my redshirt year, scared me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have that feeling, and I was like, you know what? My senior year, I'm like, I only get one opportunity to do this, and I was like, you know what, maybe it will be good for me because I can develop more as a linebacker and as a football player, not just an athlete. And so I just decided to, and we also had some awesome games on the schedule, so Florida State, like Deion Sanders was my favorite player growing up, and I get to play in the stadium that he played in. It was like, I can't miss that game. So I ended up playing again with the torn labrum, and then a repaired one.
And you played well.
Yeah.
Like I thought in 2010 you played well.
So I was having statistically, I was doing really well. Like my first 4 games, I had 38 tackles. I was leading the team in tackles. I was leading the team in tackles for loss. I was leading the team in sacks.
Were you still shooting up and doing Toradol
every day, bro?
Okay.
Yep, I had to play through that, because if I was a safety or a receiver or something, it would be a little bit different. But where my main job is to
engage
this right here, I had to shoot up before the games, because there's a lot of wear that goes on your shoulders during the games, and so and we had some guys on our team too. Kyle Van Noy, who a lot of people obviously know because of his success in the NFL, but we had some dudes, and I was that guy, and so. Yeah, dude, I was like, I gotta play, and then Utah State game. It's the 5th game of the year, and this is where a lot of things went south there for a minute. We're playing at Utah State. Statistically, I'm literally gonna triple what I did the previous year, which would set me up so nice going into my senior year. We're playing Utah State. And this was the game that we're coming back to Coach Hill now, right? This was the game that Coach Hill quit on us in the middle of the game. It's the first time we had lost to Utah State in over 10 years.
It was his second year as defensive coordinator. He became defensive coordinator in 2009.
Yep. So his second year as defensive coordinator, and I'll never forget. We were playing bad. Utah State was handing it to us, and. He stopped calling plays, man. He went and sat down on the bench when the defense was up and just folded his arms, and it's like, so Andrew Rich starts calling the plays. We're looking over to get the call, and we're like, where the hell's Coach Hill? We're like, come on, they're about to hike the ball, and there's one play where we're waiting for a play and they hike the ball and we're not even ready. And I was just like, wow. So Andrew Rich was a smart dude and great player, and so he started calling the defense, and then that series he gets a stinger, a bad one. I thought he was in deep shit. I thought he was. I'm like, are you paralyzed or what? He got
before the end of the half.
Yeah, it was before the end of the half, and it was a bad stinger, and so he was out, and now it's like, all right, I got to call the plays. So I'm calling the plays at linebacker because, Andrew goes out and I can't really.
Were you calling field side blitzes the entire time? Storm!
Even go every single play.
Nothing wrong with that.
So, yeah, dude. So I start calling the plays, and I remember it's the 3rd quarter. And I was like, you know what? If I'm going out, if we're going to lose this game, I'm going to go down hard. I'm like, I'm going down hard. And I want to put film on so coaches know, NFL scouts know, that we're down by 20. This dude's still going full go. That's what I wanted. And so, dude, I was like, screw it. Not that I was being selfish, but I was like, I'm going to focus on myself this game. And mentally, we're getting our ass kicked, but mentally I'm going to win this battle. And I never forget this receiver, man. Oh my gosh, it pissed me off. So I hate cut blocking, right? And playing Air Force used to suck. You'd come home from that game and my shin, you couldn't even see my shin bone, or you could see my shin bone.
Just open wounds from helmets
for days, dude. So anyway, yeah, dude. Where was I going with that?
The cut. You were the wide receiver came out to either. Cut block
he came out to cut block me, and he cut blocks me, and my knee kind of like it almost hyperextended. And I didn't get hurt from that play. It was no big deal, but it was the first time I felt my knee almost hyperextend, and it scared the hell out of me. I was like, oh my gosh. Like,
which knee was it?
It was, I can't even remember.
Yeah.
It was like I think it was my right knee, honestly. And it shook me up, and I was pissed. And so the next play, I didn't even get the play. I didn't even get the play call. I'm going to go rip this dude's head off and get a flag. I don't even care. And so I'm staring at this dude, and I'm like, let's go, you know? And he's sitting there staring at me like, what the heck, man? And I'm like, no, let's go. Like, me and you right now. Like, his quarterback's doing the cadence. And I'm like, come at me again. I was like, come at me again. And he comes at me, and I go and jam him, and I go to throw him, and my fingers get caught in his jersey, and I dislocate 3 of my fingers. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So I almost get my knee blown out. So I'm like, man, I got some bad karma.
Some bad energy going on.
So I go off, dude. Like, this knuckle is like in the middle of my hand. This knuckle is down here by my fingernail. Like, it was crazy. And I put some ice on it, and then I felt them like all going back to place. So I buddy system, and I went back in.
With the glove on.
With the glove on. I did the buddy tape, so I had like one finger I was playing with. And, dude, I should have never went back in. I should have never went back into that game, because that's when the end started.
You did, like, the health began to already kind of derail you somewhat, but you guys were down multiple scores.
We weren't going to win.
Yeah, not going to win that game. And you go back in. I remember it was I think it was the south end zone.
Yep.
And Utah State was driving down for another score, getting into the red zone.
Yep.
And I think you were playing on the left-hand side of the defense and breakdown.
Good.
I remember all this, bro. I was at the game. You got to realize I was at the game, and because I was right there when Andrew Rich went out, and then I saw you go down on the kind of on the outside edge on that left side.
Yeah, man. So we're on a goal line, and at this point, I'm just playing for pride. Like, we're gonna lose the game, which is why, like, you know, I should have just sat out. I already almost hyperextended my knee. I just dislocated 3 of my fingers. I was like, I should have just stayed out. But at this point, I'm playing for pride. So they had a really, a pretty decent tight end. I don't remember his name, but he was big, he was strong, and we're on the goal line, and I'm a 8 technique. So I'm head up over the tight end, and my job assignment is C-gap. I'm the C-gap defender. So I'm on this dude, and I jam him, and I go to shed him outside so that I can
fill C-gap.
So I can fill the C-gap, and my foot gets caught in the turf, and I felt my knee just pop.
And which knee was it?
It was my left knee.
Left knee.
So I'm going to shed him, and it was that torque. It was that torque, and I felt something come out. And dude, aside from my shoulders and some ankle sprains growing up from basketball and stuff, I sat out of one game my entire life. One game. And yeah, dude, so I felt my knee pop out, and I immediately let go of the guy, and I fall to the ground. And I grab my leg, and I fall down on the ground, and I'm laying on the ground, and then I feel my knee like go back in, but I couldn't bend it. Like, I went to go bend my knee, and I like physically couldn't bend it. It was the most excruciating pain in the world, and I was like, did I tear my ACL? Like, did I blow out my knee entirely? I didn't know what it was. All I knew is I couldn't bend my knee. So I get taken off the field, and yeah, man, I had to be in like a straight leg boot for like 2 weeks before I could start bending my knee again. But I didn't know what the injury was going to be or how it was going to pan out.
So he essentially what they ended up diagnosing you with was a patellar dislocation, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going through that process. So 2 weeks into it, what did the medical staff at BYU tell you? I'm sure you got an MRI or something like that, X-rays.
Yeah, so I did it. I got an MRI and got X-rays, whatever. And they basically told me like, look, nothing tore. They said the only thing that happened is like your medium retinaculum stretched a little bit, but it didn't tear. Like your kneecap came back in. And so they're like, honestly, like there's really nothing you could do except for just wait. So I waited, dude, and then like 4 weeks later, I started running and cutting again, but I never felt safe again. Like every time I cut, I felt like my knee was gonna pop out. I was so mentally scarred from it. And but it hurt like hell, and it didn't get better. And I'll never forget. I actually came back and played on it. So stupid, man. Listen, I tell kids every day now, like, listen to your body, because I didn't.
So you came back in late 2010.
Came back in late 2010, dude, and I get in. I like come off the bench, and I go on this pass rush. And, you know, pass rushing, you got to be able to work the edges of your feet, and you got to be able to torque and turn and rip and get low. And I go to take my 3 steps upfield because I was going to speed rush this guy because he was slow. And I go upfield to speed rush this guy, and I just kept running straight because I was like, I couldn't cut on it. And I was
you couldn't bend left.
I can't turn left.
He's not an ambi-turner.
I'm not an ambi-turner. So anyway, I took myself out of the game and I said, I'm done. I'm going to go figure out what the hell this is. And at this point,
You've burned the year.
Yeah, so, but played 4.5 games and statistically still had a decent season, you know. But very disappointing for sure, because that was a big year for me. But ultimately, it was a down year for BYU. I think we only went like 7-6 or something. And now it's like, man, I got to figure it, because it was like my shoulder. I'm like, okay, if nothing's wrong, then I'm a wimp. So I need to like figure out if there's anything I can do, and if not, then like, is my knee just going to feel like this forever? I don't know. So I went and got a second opinion from a knee specialist, and he talked to me about doing a lateral release. It's basically where they cut up into your what's that called?
Like the lateral side of like your
it's
like there's an IT
your
band
connective tissue and stuff. They cut up into your leg. So what happens is it weakens that side, and then it pulls the kneecap back over so that it tracks properly.
Yeah, the idea of it is like you dislocated the kneecap. Let's release that side that's pulling it laterally or outside, so it'll stabilize and be aligned with the femur, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, honestly, I said, nothing's working right now. I'm going to rehab. I'm going to therapy. Nothing's working. So I'm going to try this, because I'm like, if I don't get this to feel better, I can't play on this. So I did the lateral release, man, and he did a phenomenal job. That surgery is very controversial. Like a lot of people say, like, don't get it, right? And so, but I got it, dude, and
it worked.
I was back. Felt so good, man. I had both shoulders repaired. So I had my knee surgery and my shoulder surgery.
And that was January 2011.
Yep, 2010.
2010 or December 2010.
I decided to, because at one point I just decided the season's over.
December 2010.
So I go in and the doctor that did my knee, he did my shoulder in the same. He's a knee and shoulder specialist, so he specializes in both. So I got my knee and my shoulder done on the same day.
Wow.
Yeah. So because remember I tore my other one during fall camp, so I had another labrum tear and then a left knee lateral release.
How were you feeling emotionally and psychologically at that time? Like, were you healthy or were you depressed? Like, what was going on in that
I was beat at that point.
Yeah.
I was really mentally beat, because you know how hard it is to get in top physical condition, and then to be out of that sport for 8 months, but not be out. Like, it's one thing if you're out and you're still healthy and you're able to train, but I couldn't do anything. I was on crutches and I was in a sling. And so what makes me feel good is working out. Like, I love exercising, and that's my release. It's my escape. So if I can't do that, I get miserable. I get really miserable. Like, if I go on a vacation and I don't work out for a couple days, I'm like, let's get our asses home, man. Like, this view ain't worth it. you know? And so, yeah, man.
And so you're at that moment, you're going through this rehabilitation process, trying to get mentally, emotionally, and physically strong once again. But you got there. You got to the point where you were actually in pretty good shape, right? You're going into that 2011 season, a big year.
Yeah.
Guys returning on the defense side of the ball. Your quarterbacks are returning.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of optimism.
And that's the thing, and that's where kind of like the mental game played a huge role, is because, like I said, it's so hard to get in physical condition, but not being able to do anything and then getting back to that level, and I had to do it all over again. Like, I just did it the year before. I was out for 8 months. I got all the way back, and then now I'm down again, but worse. And I'm like, man, like the first surgery, I was motivated. I was like, okay, this, like, nothing can stop me. This time I was like, I got to do this again. Yeah. So yeah, but I grinded. I had a really good off season, and I go into junior pro day during the off season, feeling literally the best I've ever felt. I was in the best cardiovascular condition that I'd ever been. I could run for days, dude. And that was my goal that year. Is like, I wanted to, not only did I want to weigh 240 pounds, but I wanted to move like a safety. And so I went in to junior pro day feeling unbelievable, and that's when I ran my 40 time for the scouts. We had a handful of NFL scouts come out, and really it's to get times of players that are going to be seniors the next year, so that they know your measurables, right? And on your radar. And that's when I ran that 4.49 laser time. And that's when I was like, this is it. That's big time, man. And I remember the Oakland Raiders scout came up to me and asked me what my name was, took down my information, and was like, he's like that was impressive. And on a side note, and this is that sucks so bad, like Von Miller, who was the second pick taken overall in the entire NFL draft, that's what he ran at his NFL combine, was a 4.49, and he was one of the fastest linebackers ever. Yep. And he was the fastest linebacker that year in the draft, and that would have been my same year in the draft. So anyway, I did that and was feeling really good, man.
No symptoms.
No symptoms yet. And then it was like the last month. It was like July. End of June or July, because I ran that 40 in May. It was in the summer. And in end of June or early July, my knee started swelling. And I was like, oh my gosh, but it didn't hurt. So I was like, I'm fine. It's just, it's swollen, but it's not painful. So I went in and I got my first draining. I got my first knee drainage.
What did they say when you went in? You're like, hey, why is it swelling?
Yeah. I was like, why is my knee swelling? And listen, I was in an exercise and wellness major. I'm learning about the human body. I've had so many injuries that's when I started getting into training. And you don't have to be a genius. You could be pretty dumb and know that if something's swelling, that's the body's way of trying to protect itself. It's creating that fluid because something's wrong. And they told me it's just because you had knee surgery, and so your body's not used to the pounding, right? You've been off. And he's like, it's totally normal. And he told me this happened to, I can't remember what player he said, but he's like the same thing happened to so-and-so's knee. He's like, it happens all the time. And I bought into that because to me in my head that made sense. I was like, okay, I can see your point. I can see your point. So I got it drained and I felt great and I kept playing. And then 3 weeks later I needed another drain. It swole up again. And I'm like, this time it didn't bother me that much. I'm like, I'll be all right. That's part of the thing, right? It's just I'm getting used to this again. So I go and I get it drained again. And then fall camp starts. It's the first fall camp that I came into completely prepared. I knew the defense inside and out. I was fast. I was feeling healthy for the first time. Nobody's ever seen me play healthy
100%,
at BYU. Nobody's ever seen it. I didn't play one game healthy. Like, and we deal with nagging injuries.
Sure.
I'm talking healthy. Like, I'm talking torn this, like, shredded this. Not a finger jam.
Yeah.
Not a sore hip.
Or like a sprained ankle.
Or a sprained ankle even, right? Because I dislocated my, tore 2 ligaments in my ankle as well, my senior year. And so, yeah, dude, I never played healthy, but I get through fall camp, and during fall camp I have another drainage, and it still doesn't hurt. So I'm like, I'm fine. And then this trend just kept going. It comes
sooner and sooner. You're having to drain it, right?
Yes. So it started didn't have to do it for 3 weeks, and then it was like 2.5 weeks, and then it eventually became like twice a week.
And then did the doctors or the trainers say anything about like why you're having to drain it as much, or are they just like business as usual?
Just business as usual, man. Like, put the needle in,
drain it,
numb it, take the fluid out, switch the needle, numbing medicine, and you're good. So that was the problem. Is somewhere along the line, I think it was like the 4th game in, where 4th or 5th game in, where I started getting my first onset of pain, and now I was like a little worried, but it wasn't a ton of pain. So I was like, it could just be some loose cartilage, or might just need a scope or whatever, but it wasn't something I couldn't play on, or at least in my head I thought I couldn't play on. And I go through the whole season like this, dude, and it gets to a point where now, like, it's really hurting, and I started not being able to go to class because I didn't, the stairs at BYU that you have to walk up, I couldn't walk up those stairs. And I remember, it started to get super painful, and then it got to the point where I wouldn't even be able to practice because I was in so much pain. And like, legit, dude, I was getting Toradol for every practice. Toradol is like something you do before the game,
sure,
right? To just, I was getting Toradol every single day. And if you don't know, Toradol it's a long needle, and it goes in they put it in your shoulder, and then they put it in, and when they release it, it literally feels like Mike Tyson just punched you in the deltoid. It hurts like hell. Have you ever had one?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I exaggerating?
No.
Okay. Yeah. If it gives you a dead arm, like, it hurts like hell. I was getting that every day, and I would just switch shoulders, so I wasn't shooting up the same shoulder every day. And that's how I started getting through practice. Then it got a little worse. And then all of a sudden now I'm putting icy hot all over. I'm doing Toradol, taking ibuprofen, and wearing a knee brace to keep it like hot and compressed, and wearing sweats so that my legs, the icy hot, would just melt and just sweat, and it would burn so bad that I couldn't feel my knee. That's how I practiced. And holy hell, man, it got so painful. And then
And no MRI. You didn't get an MRI. You didn't it was just drain and go.
Drain and go.
Just drain and go. No MRI. Did you request anything like that? Because I feel like you've had all these experiences with athletic trainers and physicians, maybe misdiagnosing or not getting the dye in there. Did you have a mistrust of the medical staff, and did you want to seek out another opinion after that?
Yeah, I definitely had definitely didn't believe in them. I didn't trust them, just from I had that misdiagnosis of my shoulder, like, that messed me up. And so I remember we were playing TCU, and the following week was our bye week. And I'm like, I'm not going to go do this before the TCU game, because, like, there's no way I'm missing this game. And I knew for a fact, just because my coaches told me, not Coach Mendenhall, he wouldn't tell me this, but as Papinga told me, that there was going to be 5 NFL scouts there watching me, so will you play special teams? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, you need to, he's like, you know, he's like, we've tried to keep you off of special teams because because I tried out for special teams my senior year. I went all in. I showed up first day of fall camp, and they had kickoff, and I was like, I went out with the ones, and I'm like, I'm gonna be on kickoff team. Like, I took that shit seriously. So I was playing special teams, and then I was never able to because my knee hurt so bad that, you know, they wanted to just save me for
the game,
just to play linebacker. And so yeah, man. So I get into the TCU week, and I can't practice. I remember I had an interview with Kathy Aiken. You remember Kathy?
Yep.
And it was a story on me, and it was a story about how I became one of Mendenhall's favorite players by the way that I played the game, which he loved. You know, Mendenhall, like, he loves physicality. He loves, you know, flying around, pursuit drill. Effort, dude. And I always gave effort. And so I'm waking up to go to that interview in the morning, and I legit couldn't walk up the stairs. And so I had to have somebody help me get up the stairs. And then I remember driving to the BYU broadcast media place or whatever. And I go in, and I'm doing this interview, and she's asking me all these questions, and it's like an interview about, you know, like, you're doing good, you know? But in my mind, I'm sitting here like, my knee hurts so bad, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to play ever again. Like, it was so painful. And so I do this interview, and then I just left, like, feeling disgusted. Like, man, I just did this interview, and I don't even know if I can play anymore. Like, I'm going to be embarrassed because this interview is going to come out next week, and it's going to be like, out for the season again. Like, kid can't stay healthy to save his life. And so I left that interview. I go through practice. I don't practice all week. And Coach Mendenhall has a rule, like, if you don't, it doesn't matter if you're a 4-year starter or a walk-on player. If you don't practice on, like, at least, I think it was at least Thursday and Friday, you will not play in the game. That was his rule. I'm glad he broke that rule for me. I don't even think he knew that he broke the rule for me, or maybe he just acted like he didn't know. But I didn't practice that whole week. It came Thursday, and it's Thursday, and Coach Papinga comes up to me, and he's like, "Hey, man," he's like, you got to practice today if Coach Mendenhall is going to play you." And I looked at him, and dude, I Toradol shot, ibuprofen, icy hot, knee sleeve, pants, just steam, bro. Just, it didn't matter. It still hurt. And I told him, I looked at him, and I'm like, dude, I can't practice. Like, I'm like, you're going to have to bench me, you know? Yeah. Like, bench me, I can't practice. And they didn't know what was going on, and that's what made it frustrating to me is I didn't want them to think I was a prima donna. Like, oh, like, I don't need to practice and stuff. Like, I love practice, man. And so, you know, that was my main thing, is like, I didn't want them to think that I was a diva. I wanted to practice. Mentality. Yeah, like, because you can't practice. And Coach Mendenhall, he does have an old school mentality as far as that kind of stuff goes, right? And so I wanted to be there, but man, I couldn't. I couldn't. And so I travel with the team. We fly out Friday, and then you know how when you get to the hotel, we have a walkthrough, like, out in the parking lot, right? A lot of schools do it, I'm sure, but it's still weird because it's like, I mean, it's just to keep us busy so we're not out causing trouble, right?
Making bad decisions.
So we do the walkthrough, and Coach Pinga's like, dude, if you can just get through this walkthrough, then he's like, he's like, I won't even mention that you didn't practice Thursday, and he's like, just get through this walkthrough for me and act like, you know, you're not hurt and stuff. And I was like, I go out, we're in the parking lot, and they run like a fly sweep, and I'm like coming down, you know, and you know how Coach Mendenhall is, like, it's a walkthrough, but you're still having to like show effort and get to your spot. Our walkthroughs is like a full speed sprint, right? So we're out in the parking lot, like running all over the place. So his walkthroughs are not walkthroughs, and they came on a fly sweep. They handed it off to the scout team running back, and I go up to, like, I'm the force player, of course, and I couldn't even force the play, and it bounced outside of me, and then he made us run the play again because he was pissed, and that's when I was like, I can't do this. So I was like, Jameson, like, get in here, dude. So I went out, and then I was just, that whole night I was thinking, like, what am I going to do? Because he just told me these scouts are coming to watch me, and I couldn't even do a walkthrough in a parking lot of a hotel. It was terrible.
Wow. So just to, kind of get perspective, so this is 2011. This is like mid-season by that time. Which game was the TCU game?
It was our 8th game. So we had TCU, a bye week, and 4 games left before the bowl.
And how many games had you played in up to that time?
I had played in, I think, 4 or 5. Because, and that's something we didn't even talk about.
And you also had an ankle injury.
I had an ankle injury. So we play Ole Miss game 1. I have a phenomenal game. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm back, dude. Like, I had gone a long time without playing football. Almost a year. And I was so injured, and I had so many surgeries that I didn't feel like myself. And after that game, I was like, okay, I'm back. Next game, we play at Texas, which was an awesome environment. And that game was frustrating because they didn't run the ball to me and Andrew Rich's side. So it was a game, I was coming off this Ole Miss game where I had led the team in tackles, and, I had quarterback hits, like 3 of them, and made some really good plays. And so I'm like, man, now we're going to Texas? Like, let's go. We just beat an SEC team, and now we're going to Texas. And that's every kid's dream, is to play in a stadium like that. Boring game, dude. I had like 3 tackles, and I think what happened is, like, they watched film. You don't run to our strong side.
Yeah.
Andrew Rich is one of the best safeties ever play. I'm right there at Sam. It's me and him, and then we had an awesome corner, and that was physical. And so, and our interior linemen are always good. And so you didn't run to our. So, dude, they didn't run to my side the entire game. So the entire game I was just standing around, and I was doing pursuit drills because I was so bored. I'm like, at least I'm gonna, like, run and get myself in the film so that Coach Mendenhall, like, points me out,
exactly. Yeah.
And so, anyways, dude, the game goes on, and we end up losing by, I think, 1 point.
Yep.
And very frustrating game, but our defense balled out. We held them to 14 points, and one of their touchdowns was from the offense. The offense, like, threw a pick 6, or it was a fumble or something. So we really held a Texas team with Colt McCoy's little brother at quarterback. You had that Shipley kid. Like, you had some dudes, and we hold them to 7 points. And I was like, hell yeah. It's the second to last play, and it's where they get the ball back, and all they need to do is kneel the ball. And it's the second to last play of the game. I kid you not, the play is over, the whistle is blown, and I think it was Romney Fuga and one of their offensive linemen. They got in, like, this little, they played after the whistle. It wasn't an altercation. It wasn't like, they played through the whistle. The whistle blows, and I'm walking back to my spot, just nonchalant. And I have 600 pounds, because they were tied up with each other, fall on my ankle. And I just remember, and then literally the next play, they kneeled the ball, and the game was over. That's how I got hurt. So I was like, you've got to be kidding me, dude. Like, it wasn't even a play. It was me walking off, and they fell on my ankle. So anyway, dude, I tore 2 ligaments in my ankle, and I went and saw this guy. I was going to an outside source at this point, and he told me, dude, he's like, bro, this is normally like a 6 to 7 week deal. If we push it. He's like, I promise I'll get you back in 3 if you just do what I tell you to do. Well, that 3rd game was who? Utah.
Yeah.
So it's my senior year. And this guy's telling me, like, dude, I know this is important to you, but take these 3 games off and then come back and ball out the rest of the season, which it didn't end up mattering anyway because of my knee. But I didn't listen to him. Dr. Brady and someone I really respect. So give him a shout out on the show. Dr. Brady, he's an awesome individual, and helped me like actually be able to play. He's the only reason I was able to get through these games. And so he tells me not to play, and it's Utah, and I'm like, I want to hit Jordan win again, so let's go.
Let's go, dude. So you shoot up your knee, shoot up your ankle?
Yeah, so, dude, so I shot up my ankle, numbed my ankle, of course, Toradol shot, 80 ibuprofen, and I go out there, and I legit made it, like, halfway through the game. And it was so funny, because it was so ironic, because my sophomore year when we played Utah is when I had that big hit on him. And Jordan Wynn's a good dude. He was a phenomenal quarterback as a freshman, and would have been really good had he not had injury problems. So I really don't have any bad feeling towards the dude. He's just a Utah Ute, and he happened to be in my way. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm really thinking like, I'm like, I want to do this again, because now it's at home, and I never forget, I came on a blitz, and this is in the second quarter, and it's a close game, dude. Like, it's a really close game. And we were playing really good on defense, and I came off the edge, and his back was turned to me, and I had a clear shot at his, I was going to say spine, but we can't say that, right? His back. I was just like I was drooling, bro. But my ankle is not letting me be the athlete that I want to be. So I'm running, and I'm going, and he was in the end zone, so it would have been a safety. He could have fumbled, we could have scored, and I had all these things going in my mind. I'm like, I'm going to kill him. Last second, he sees me out of the corner of his eye and did one of those spin outs where they spin out the top, and I didn't take the proper rate. I didn't go to his top shoulder. I just wanted to kill him. And so he goes to spin out, and I just ran straight all the way to the stands, because I couldn't, again, I can't turn left.
Couldn't decelerate.
Yeah.
He was not
Couldn't decelerate, and I sure as hell was not going to plant off my foot. And it was after that play that I was like, I'm screwed, dude. Yeah. I'm screwed. I made it so much worse. And so I went in. I didn't play the second half. We ended up getting just annihilated in the second half. And then, man, now I got to miss some more games.
Yeah, so you had to take off those games. How many games did you miss?
So I think I missed like 3 or 4, and I can't really remember, honestly.
And during that process, were you getting drained in the knee again, or
getting drained in the knee, and then I was getting around the clock treatment on my ankle from Dr. Brady. Around the clock, dude. I was paying out of my own pocket.
And then you didn't get an MRI during that process either.
Didn't get an MRI.
You're just like, I'm just gonna keep going.
trying to heal that ankle and hoping that the rest would allow my knee to, feel better. Because at that time, the Utah game, my knee wasn't hurting that bad.
Yeah.
It was more when I started coming back. So I missed like 3 games, and then I come back. And listen, that ankle injury was bad. Like 2 torn ligaments. So I didn't feel great when I played, but I was just trying to play through that pain, and I needed to film, man. I wanted to film. And so I came back, and I had I ran off like 3 or 4 really good games. Oregon State, we played Oregon State, had some sacks. We played, I can't remember who we played at home, and I ran off like 3-4 really good games, and I was feeling good, but that's when my knee started hurting.
Yeah.
And then I'm already dealing with my ankle. And then, yeah, man, so.
Then TCU.
Yeah. So I go in Friday night, and I'm like, there's no way I'm playing tomorrow. I'm like, this sucks. The scouts are coming. And I'm like, I told Coach Papinga I'll be a game time decision. I was going to go through my protocol, drain, numb, Toradol, ibuprofen, icy hot, put it on my balls this time, make them burn. Like, I'll do whatever, dude. So I go through the protocol, and
did you really put it on your scrotum?
No.
Okay,
no,
I was gonna say I'm just saying, like, that's next level, like right there.
That should have been my next part of my routine. But
distract your knee from the pain.
So I go out there, and we're in warm-ups, dude, and I just remember, like, dude, my quad was shut down. So I felt like every cut I did, my knee was going to blow out. Like, I had no support. I had no musculature support around my joint. And I felt like I was going to blow out. So, yeah, dude, I went out during warm-ups. And then I get out there, and I'm back in that moment, Dallas Cowboys Stadium. I'm like having flashbacks of the Oklahoma game. I look over, I see the Colts scout. I look over, I see the Steelers scout. Steelers is who I wanted to play for. I love their defense. I love like how grimy they were. James Harrison was one of my favorite players, and the Steelers actually were the team that was the highest on. Like they were the highest on me, and like they would come meet with Coach Pepingo all the time, and so I was like this, and I got this adrenaline rush, and it took over. It took over my entire body, and I came out, dude, and I just told Coach Pepingo, I'm like, I'm good to go, and he put me in. I was shocked. So I ended up going in, and honestly, dude, like it's one thing, like statistics don't really matter at the outside backer position. A lot of times we're doing things so that other people can make plays. If I'm a C-gap defender, I'm not trying to make the tackle. I'm trying to bounce it outside so the Mike can make the tackle. If I'm a force player, I'm trying to force it in for the safety to funnel down and make the tackle. There's a lot of stuff that goes unknown that outside linebackers do. And I'm a little bit biased to the position, but that's the truth. I'm setting the edge so you can come make the tackle. Plays that we make have to be plays on our own. Pass rushing, I got to win a one-on-one battle, or I'm out in coverage, locked up one-on-one on a receiver playing zone, and I'm just playing my zone, right? So you got to make stuff happen. And yeah, man, I had one of my best games ever. I graded out at like a 97%, which that's what's important, right? Yeah. Fans watch the game and they're like, oh, this
stats.
Yeah, interception, and oh, this guy's amazing. And dude, some of my best statistical game was against Florida State. I think I had like 11 tackles and 2.5 sacks, and I graded out at like a 60%. I did so terrible, dude. I did so terrible. So yeah, dude, I was just that dialed in, and I got through the game. I graded at a 97%. The only reason I didn't get 100% is he said effort, but it's because I wasn't doing those pursuit drills at the end of the plays like Coach Mendenhall wanted us to do. But I had a perfect assignment game. I made some good plays. The best part is I even played special teams. I went down on kickoff, and first time on kickoff my entire career at BYU. First time. I go down, this running back comes over here, and they do like a kind of a reverse play, and he bounces back over to my side, dude, and I took a great angle, and I tackled him on like the 10-yard line or something, right? So their field position's terrible now, and I did it right in front of those scouts. And so I was like, that was my moment. That was the thing, is like I made it happen on special teams too. But dude, honestly, I had this surreal feeling during the game that it was my last game, because as much as my mind took over, I had no stability in my knee. My quad, I didn't have a quad. Like it was shut down. Like you could literally grab my quad and it was jiggly because I had no muscle, because my joint was so disrupted. And we get done with the game, all that pain med wears off, and I had to be carried to the bus that is going to take us to the airport. I couldn't put pressure on my foot. My knee hurt so bad, dude. It was terrible. It was swollen again, and yeah, dude. So I was really scared at that moment. I'm like leaving, and I'm like, shit,
done.
Yeah.
So that's a devastating feeling, obviously. And if you had that surreal, feeling where it's like, this is my last game, things come to a head rather quickly when those emotions are running high. At that point where you're like, okay, now I have to go into the medical staff and request an MRI. I got to figure out what's wrong, because I can't keep on doing this anymore.
Yeah. So and I was already planning on it because it had been hurting, and the frustrating thing is none of the coaches even knew I was getting drained. Like the position coaches, they had no clue what I was going through. And we had a bye week that week, so I was planning on getting one anyway. And I went in, I was like, I need an MRI. It was terrible, dude. And I went in, got my MRI, and then he called me, the athletic trainer at BYU called me the next day. And I was with my girlfriend at the time. And we were driving, we were going to get some like food or something, and I get the call, and as soon as I saw his name, like bam, answer, like I need to know what's going on. And I answer, and I'm like, hey, you know, how's it going? What's going on? Like, did you get the diagnosis? And he says, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news first? And I was like, just tell me the bad news, because if there is bad news, then who cares about the good news?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And he said I was bone on bone in my knee, and that my cartilage was, you know, basically it was damaged. And I was bone on bone, but it was on my lateral condyle, my weight-bearing surface, you know, which makes it worse. So I found out I was bone on bone, dude, at like 22 years old, you know, and I was devastated, bro. I was like, me and my girlfriend were crying in the car. I sat in my car and cried for like 2 hours, mainly because I was so upset that I let BYU like nation down, because they never saw me play healthy.
Yeah.
They never saw me play a game where I was healthy, and people still think that I was a decent player,
a great player.
And they have no clue, because they never even saw me play at even 70%. You know, so that was the, you know, that was the biggest disappointment. But yeah, I found out I was bone on bone, dude, and then, man.
Then you hit rock bottom.
Rock bottom, dude. Rock bottom.
So at that point, you have to figure out what you're going to do next, surgical procedure.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of things are going through your mind. Like, is this reparable? Is this fixable? Can I get back? What were those conversations like with the physicians and medical staff?
Yes, you could tell they were super optimistic about it, because they were trying to make it seem like it wasn't as bad, because they know that they screwed up. I had been swelling since June.
How many different aspirations and drains did they do?
Probably at least 10.
10.
Yeah. And so it's like, dude, this was a problem in June, and you guys could have fixed it. And you know, I'm not a doctor, but you know, I'm convinced that had I've got diagnosed when it first happened, when I dislocated my knee, I would still be playing. And obviously there's so much that goes into it, but in my mind, that's how I feel. And the reason is, cartilage, once it's gone, it's gone. I wish I would have blown up my knee. I wish I would have torn my ACL, because I can repair that. Mm-hmm. You can't repair cartilage. Once it's gone, it's gone. They haven't figured it out yet. Now, there's things you can do. You can do a microfracture surgery. You can do an implant, which I heard, like, don't do, because your body can reject it and it doesn't even work, and then you got to do it again. You know, it's expensive. You got to find a match, somebody that has similar, you know. And so I was like, don't want to do that. But the thing that they were optimistic about is they told me, like, oh, the hole, it's not like too big that we can't fill that in and you can, like, you know, come back from it. So they had this chart, and it was funny because it's like they gave me this chart of professional athletes that had microfracture surgery that came back to play. And then I was like, the list was not long. I don't even think there was a list. Yeah. There's some basketball players that have done it, but again, it's, you know, Greg Oden, that's what ruined Greg Oden's career. And people don't understand, you can be bone on bone and not on your weight bearing surface, and it's not as bad. I know people that run marathons that are bone on bone.
Yeah.
But when you're 240 pounds and you play that physical of a position, and it's on your weight bearing surface, it's damn near impossible to come back from. So I decided to go with microfracture surgery, hoping that the hole was small enough that I could fill in enough scar tissue to support my surrounding cartilage, and that I would be able to I was in denial, bro. I thought I could come back from this. Even then, I still was like, I'm playing in the NFL. So I tried to come back from this.
And one of the things that I think is important in this process is when you get injured, it's very difficult because you kind of go unseen, and like you're not necessarily a part of the team. You're in like rehab mode. which is also very detrimental, I think, to your psyche and the emotions that you experience, the mental health side of things. And so I know that portion of your life was very difficult. Once again, you've gone through it a number of times.
Yeah.
You felt like you let down probably your family, let down BYU Nation, and now you're like, okay, I can still make it back, but I'm in the same boat once again this offseason.
Yeah, and I didn't really even have an off season because I was a senior. Like, my year was over, and so, but that was the third year in a row now that I got back to the top, and then went back down 8 months out, back to the top, back down 8 months out, get feeling good, tear your ankle up, get feeling good, and then bam. And now I'm out a year and a half because that surgery now is, I'm 2.5 months non-weight bearing. I literally had to sit down to shower. Yeah. Because when I would stand in the shower, I could only stand on one leg, and it used to scare the hell out of me that I was gonna slip and fall. So I legit put a chair in my shower, and I showered on a chair with a bag around my leg for 2.5 months, and that's when the depression kicked in, man, because it was that third time that I've been I got to come back from this now, and mentally that was the worst.
And I know you continued to strive after your dreams, right, of making it in the NBL, rehabilitating, getting injections, trying all sorts of things to try to get back. Kind of explain that process, and then when did you finally give up on that dream and realize, okay, the NFL is not going to happen, my body won't be able to?
Yeah, so I started coming back from it, and like I said, I'm not a doctor, but my opinion on the bone-on-bone is if your hole is small enough and you go in and get a microfracture surgery, you have enough surrounding cartilage. So let's think about a rock chip on your windshield. Yeah. You get a rock chip, right? But it's not the end of the world. Unless it splits immediately, it's not the end of the world. You go and get it repaired so that it doesn't spread. And that's how I viewed this injury. This started minimal. It started as a little cartilage defect, barely, and that's why I never felt any pain. Initially, I was just training and going, so I never felt any pain. And so when I started feeling the pain, is that hole started getting big, starting to widen, and so that's what really frustrated me. And coming back, I did a couple things. Dude, I actually went and got stem cells done. I found this guy in where is he from? Washington or something. And me and my mom drove out, dude. We left and drove all the way. It was a 14-hour drive or something stupid.
And this was 2012?
Okay. Yeah, 2012. And so I go and I'm going to get stem cells, and I get that done, and that was right after the microfracture surgery. So I'll never really know if they worked. I did have my hole got filled, but it's now filled with a scar tissue layer.
Like a fibrocartilage?
Yes, exactly. It's like a fibrocartilage. It's a hard surface. So it's like taking out a bouncy ball and putting in a rock. Being here, this is what's in between your tibia and femur bone. Yeah. So I'll never know if the stem cells truly worked, or if it was the microfracture surgery that helped fill my knee in. There's so many questions, but it filled in enough for me to start getting back, dude. And I grinded, bro. I moved back. I was living with my parents in their basement. I was married at the time, and I had the stress and the pressure of making money because I'm a newlywed, but I also have this side of me over here that's dude, this has been your dream since you were 5 years old. You need to be putting all your attention into rehabbing and getting back and seeing if you can make this.
Otherwise, you're going to have regrets.
Or I'm going to have regrets, which is way worse.
And then there's remorse, and then there's also there's resentment that you can have in a relationship.
100%. So I started getting this pressure from here to pay the bills and stuff, and I'm living in my parents' basement. Like, this is my focus.
Yeah.
So I did both, dude. I went and got like a full-time job. I was delivering carpet and like carpet pad. It's the worst job ever. I enjoy labor work, so it wasn't like, and I'm just lifting stuff all day.
Yeah, you get stuff
Pay
done.
me to lift, like, for sure. So, but dude, I would empty 100 to 200 to 300 those big old rolls of pad, and like, they're heavy, dude. So I was doing that I would wake up in the morning, I would go to Lifetime Fitness at like 5 in the morning, and I would do some pull work, right? Because it displaces some of my body weight, so it's not so hard on my joints. So I would go do pull work in the morning, I would go deliver carpet and pad and whatever, and then work in the warehouse. I was working in the warehouse. And I'd get done with that. I would go up to Tosh, to the physical therapist I was seeing at the time. And then I would come home. I would go to Lifetime again. This is when I would do my lift, and then I would start slowly implementing some movement. And then I'd go home and I'd go to bed, and then I'd do it all over again, because I didn't want to live with that regret. So I did that. I did that for a while. And then to answer your question, when I knew it was time, I never felt good. Like, I remember the first time I did a linear sprint, and it felt good. I was like, oh my gosh. And I felt fast, I was like, holy crap. Like, if I'm really going to come back from this. Like, oh my gosh. It gave me so much excitement. 2 days later, I go out and do some lateral movement and some multi-directional movement. And I had to take a week off because my knee hurt so bad. And so I was like, shit. So I only felt good going forward. And I remember it got to the point where my marriage was getting heated, because I had this pressure of providing, which I put that pressure on myself. Like, I should be providing, but I also I also didn't know that I was going to get this knee injury and have to rehab for 1.5 years. And so I go in and I go get a follow-up with my doctor, Dr. Cooley. He's amazing, up at the Park City Clinic, the Cooley Metcalf Clinic. If you ever have a knee injury, that's your guy, man. He did Tiger Woods' knee. Like, the dude he's a great dude. I go up to him because my agent, it came to a point, I was like, I've got to just forget the pain and just go for it. Just, if my knee blows out, then who cares, right? Like, get another surgery and then move on. So I call my agent, because I had an agent before I found out my life was over. And
football life.
Yeah, and he was still representing me. It was Carter Chow, Norm Chow. So, like, I had history with them, like Norm Chow, BYU legend, and my dad knew Norm. My dad coached with Norm, and so Carter was representing me, and they do a phenomenal job. A really good agency. They have Tom Brady. I mean, it's a good agency, and I tell him, like, hey man, I'm ready. Like, let's go. And I wasn't ready, but I told him. So he gets me 4 workouts lined up. And I'm like, dude, I've had 7 surgeries now. I haven't played for 1.5 years, and I missed like 30-something games in my college career, and you still got me like 4 workouts lined up. It's like, dude, you need a promotion, bro. and that's after microfracture surgery too. So shout out to Carter Chow. So the one I was really excited about was the Patriots, because, dude, that's when Clay Matthews was there. And I'll never forget, like, my sophomore year when we played against Oklahoma, Vic So'oto was at the game. He flew out with the game, and at the time he was on the Green Bay Packers. And after the game, he came up to me, and I'll never forget, and I ended up actually training Vic and having a very good relationship with him. But he came up to me after the game, and he was like, dude, he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, he's like, you don't understand, do you? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I promise. He's like, I play with Clay Matthews. He's like, you're better than him, dude. He's like, you're better. And he told me this actually like during the game when we were down. He's like, I promise. He's like, I play with him. Like, go do your thing. And it pumped me up. And so I was like, hell yeah. So I was excited about the Packers. So I was like, even though in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's no way in hell. So I go to Dr. Cooley. Dude, he stays after hours with me, which like, dude, doctor's that busy. It meant the world to me. He stayed after hours and met with me and my mom in person. I texted him on his personal cell phone, which doctors don't give out. And he met with me and he told me he did the MRI, and that's what we were meeting about. Because Carter requested one because he was going to, look at it and make sure my knee looked good enough, because what happens when you go work out for a team, you are a legit guinea pig.
Yeah.
Like, they poke and prick you, and they know your injury history. They know every surgery you've had. They know every practice you've missed, every game you've missed. They know your stuff. So when you go out and if you've had previous injuries, they MRI and X-ray every injury you've ever had to make sure this is somebody I'm going to invest a lot of money in. And so I needed to get an MRI to know if it was good enough to be able to travel and then go get an MRI by a team and have them look at it and be like, all right, this passes. Like, we'll still, because if they looked at my MRI and it was terrible, they would be like, yeah, get the hell out of here. Here's your airplane ticket. We'll see you later. So I went and got the MRI, and he told me, you still have a layer in there, but it's winding down. It's chipping away.
The tread's wearing down.
The tread, and it's because it's that tough fibrous
fiber cartilage.
Fiber cartilage, and he told me it was thinning, and he said if they look at the MRI, they're going to know that it's thin, but at least it's full. And he's like, listen, he's like, you know how I feel about sports and getting people back to sports. Like, it's important to me. That's why I do this. I'm just going to give you my honest opinion. And I was like, okay, shoot. And then he told me, now I'll let you go play, and you can go try out, do it. And again, at this point, it's a long shot anyway. But he's like, go out and play. And he's like, you'll make it 1 year at most. Or call it and be able to walk around and still be active with your kids. And that's when it hit me, dude. It was that meeting. And I was like, I think I'd rather play with my kids than, like, what am I trying to prove? Like, 1 year in the NFL? Who gives a shit? Like, so many people that should be playing in the NFL don't make it. And a lot of people that shouldn't be playing in the NFL make it. And that's just life. And so I had this childhood dream, and I had this outside pressure of being the best, that, like, I was so fixated on that one goal. And then when it came down to that, or like my actual livelihood, I've seen so many people be screwed up, messed up from sports and injuries. I didn't want to go down that path of being like that bitter football player that never made it. And so that's when I call it quits, dude. And that's when I came and started working with you. And honestly, that was one of the most depressing years of my life.
How did you recover from that? And I know we'll get into kind of that process, but before we get into it, how long did it take you to come to the realization that obviously it's over and you got to move on, and you were comfortable and content with it?
Yeah, dude, it took me like a couple years. It took me a couple years. Like, I was in the shitter, dude. I remember I didn't watch a BYU football game for like 2 years. I didn't watch an NFL game, and that's my life. Like, I love watching like the Rockets or the Raptors and the Warriors are playing right now, and I'm like pissed I can't watch. But this is way better anyway. But that's my life. I didn't watch football because I would watch it and it would make me depressed. It would make me sick. Like, gosh, and then the hardest thing was seeing linebacker after linebacker after linebacker from BYU, bam, 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 right?
In the NFL, yeah.
After me, it was like Kyle Van Noy gets drafted, and then Alani Fua gets he didn't get drafted, but he got picked up and actually made the team.
Even Spencer Hadley
played 3 years. Spencer Hadley made the active roster with the Oakland Raiders, and Fred Warner. It's and then it's now Taki, and I really hated myself for a while because I viewed that in a negative way. Like it was almost hard for me to be happy for them, because I was on the outside in looking like, man, like that should be me, but it's not, and it made me resent the game of football. It made me resent it.
So as you kind of take an inventory of everything that occurred during that process, and ultimately these lessons learned during that process catapulted you into the position that you're in and what you're passionate about doing now, what were those lessons learned that you're now disseminating with a new generation of athletes and football players and individuals that you come in contact with?
I think the main thing, man, was being very wary of who you trust. And trust is a huge thing with me. Like if you do me wrong, like I want to come at your throat. That's just how I am. That's why I love my dog so much, because he's just loyal, right?
And you've had a couple of really loyal dogs.
Yeah. So I put too much trust into people that weren't out for my best interest. I assumed, because BYU was a LDS constitution, that there was going to be different standards there. And I'm not here to bash on BYU at all. Like, I got my degree from BYU. My sister married her husband, Austin Colley, from me playing at BYU. A lot of good came from me going to BYU, and I would never just sit and like bash them. But you realize that there's terrible people everywhere, and it doesn't matter if it's an LDS school. And I was naive about that, because I was always the crazy one. I was always on the edge. I had the mohawk. I wore the single-digit number at linebacker. I started that. I was an outcast. I wanted to be different. And, yeah, man, like that,
Just the trust and like learning how to, because obviously you have to learn how to like trust people, but at the same time, you have to be hopefully able to navigate the world while, not necessarily living pessimistically, but at the same time, making educated decisions about who you're associating with and your health, mind, body, soul.
And that's the main thing is, obviously the trust, and I put too much trust into experts. And, I would say, and this is what I teach my kids all the time, is I wish I would have educated myself. I wish I would have educated myself. Like, I had access to it. Like, you're a grown, is it their fault? Yeah, I can say it's their fault. It's their job. I'm just an 18-year-old kid. I'm a 19-year-old kid. But there's Google. There's books. Like, if you're playing a sport that has that high of demand on the human body, then maybe you should educate yourself a little bit. And so I try to educate kids all day. That's all I do, and that's why I do what I do, is because they need to know why you can't squat like that, why you can't bench like that, what this is doing to your shoulder when you're lifting like this. And over time, if you keep doing that, when you're young, you're going to fight through those things. And it doesn't matter as much. When you get older, it catches up to you. And you create bad habits long enough that you end up breaking. And that's what happened to me. And I just did what I was told. And I think it sucks, because my biggest life lesson is to be a hard worker. So if a coach tells me hey, you got to bench 450 if you want to play, I'm going to bench 480.
Yeah.
I want to play. And that was the most frustrating part, is as much as I want kids to do what their coach says and be respectful and don't, whatever, that same thing is what ruined me. Because I didn't sit back and say, okay, this doesn't feel right. I'm not practicing. Screw you. Like, you're not paying my bills when I get older. You don't have the final say in this. I didn't do that because I wanted to be a good team player. I wanted to impress my coaches every day, and I always felt like I was fighting for my job. Like, that's how I was. And so I didn't listen to my body. I didn't listen to my intuition. I didn't listen to Dr. Brady when he told me not to play in that Utah game. I just didn't listen. And now I know, like, when parents tell you, like, they tell you all things when you're a kid, and you're like, shut up, like, you don't know. And then you find out the hard way. Yeah. I found out the hard way.
Yeah. Positive lessons, though, like that you take away that ultimately have enriched you, right? There's negative, and then there's also positive lessons that have ultimately determined your now success that we'll get into, in that next segment.
Yeah, the positive took a while to come. Mm-hmm. I think the positive was, and it's funny, I got it tattooed on my wrist. I actually got this tattooed on my wrist right before everything started failing. Like, my red shirt freshman year, I got this tattoo on my wrist, and it says perseverance. It's my favorite word, perseverance. And I'd say that the main lesson I learned, and that's the thing, I get this tattooed. Obviously, it pissed my mom off, whatever. And then all this stuff starts happening to me, and I'm like, dude, you got this tattooed on your wrist. Like, you better live up to that stuff. You better live up to it. And so that word and that mindset is like what got me out, but it took a long time, and that was my lesson, is like, it doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as you just keep chipping at it. And like, I was lost along the way a lot. I got a divorce. I went through a lot of stuff in my early 20s. I've been bone on bone for 8 years now. I'm only 30. Like I mentioned, I went through divorce at a young age. Like, I've been through the ringer, and it's never too late. And that was my thing, is like, if you can persevere long enough, you can find your way and pick yourself back up on your feet. And that's what I tried to do.
Pendleton, performance and perseverance seems to go all hand in hand.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Any final message to those that are going through those rough times right now, that are looking for that perseverance in their own life, and they're doubting their own ability to persevere?
That's a great question, man, and we'll get into this in the next segment. But it was like, even before I started my business, man, I doubted myself. I was like, it's saturated. Like, there's Stroshine and John Madsen and the other Stroshine, and I'm like, it's too saturated. I'm not going to get any clients, and I put it off, and it's just like with life. Like, dude, there's always going to be somebody else. There's always going to be somebody else that's taller than you, faster than you, stronger than you, better looking than you. There's always going to be that, and you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in here that you're capable, and you have to put your head down and go to work. And my biggest thing is, I don't want to live with regrets. I'm not scared to fail. I've been running my business now for 5 years, and if it flops tomorrow, I'll figure something else out. Like, I'm not scared to fail now, and I think that was the main thing I took away from it, is I failed miserably at my goal. And a lot of it wasn't necessarily because of me, but because of my body. So I failed that goal that I had since I was 5. And once that goes away, depression kicks in, and it's really hard to come out of that. And, I worked on my mind, dude, because that was the only thing that was going to like get me out. I legit did not know what I was going to do with my life, really. And so I just persevered. And then at the time I was working with you, I said, screw it, like I'm going after this. And that's when I started making some moves.
And you persevered. We'll get to that next.
You're listening to the One Podcast with Jordan Pendleton.